Today I want to, let me not skip ahead. If I were to tell you to take out your Bibles now and turn to the book of Elijah, you would find out very quickly there ain't no book of Elijah. But there really ought to be, because Elijah is a pretty amazing character in the Old Testament. He's one of the prophets, and those Old Testament prophets kind of remind me of gunslingers in the Old West. They would come to town and everybody would go, "Oh, he's here, he's here." And everybody would run and hide because they knew what the prophet was there for. He was there to set them straight. He was there to say, here's what God says you better do or else. And so Elijah shows up and he has a message to deliver to King Ahab. Now, King Ahab was a bad, bad king. The only person worse than King Ahab was his wife. She was so bad that we still use her name to describe evil people. His wife's name was Jezebel. And so Queen Jezebel was even more mean and ornery and evil than Ahab. Between the two of them, there was not many redeeming qualities. So Elijah shows up and tells King Ahab, God says to tell you, it ain't gonna rain no mo. He says it's not gonna rain. Period. And of course, why should Ahab believe him? This is his first encounter with Elijah. He doesn't know if he's telling the truth or not. Elijah goes away. And sure enough, a horrible drought descends on the country. And it gets worse and worse and worse. Elijah, though, is taken care of. God sends him to a place where he can hide out. It says he is fed every day by ravens. Ravens would bring him food. Now, that's pretty cool. And then eventually, God says, okay, it's time to show him what's what. You go back and see Ahab. Well, Ahab has been looking for Elijah everywhere because he thinks he's cursed the country, and that's why it hasn't rained. Not realizing it's God's idea, not Elijah's idea. So Elijah comes back, and Ahab says, oh, there you are, you old troublemaker. And Elijah says, no, you're the one making trouble. God is going to teach you a lesson. And he challenges Ahab's prophets of a false god named Baal. They worshiped an idol named Baal and another idol named Asherah. There were 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. And Elijah says, why don't we just have a little challenge? I'm the only prophet of God left. How about me against 850 of your pagan prophets? Pretty good odds for Ahab. What's the bet? What's the competition? Elijah says, let your prophets pick out two bulls and prepare them for a sacrifice. They put theirs on one altar, I'll put mine on one altar, and then let's take turns and see whose God can make fire rain from heaven and take up the sacrifice. All the people standing around listening and saying, that sounds like a good idea. We want to see that, yeah. And so they do it, and they go to a place where it will be seen from everywhere. They go onto the top of a mountain called Carmel. We were just there, weren't we, Chloe? Back in January this year, we stood on the top of Mount Carmel. You can see 360 degrees from there. Beautiful spot, beautiful high spot. So they prepare these two big altars. They slaughter these two bulls and lay them out on these stone altars. And then Elijah says, you guys go first. So they begin to pray to their gods. Nothing happens. They begin dancing around the idol, chanting. Nothing happens. They do this for a couple of hours. And then Elijah starts goading them a little bit. He says, hey, that is a God you're talking to, right? Maybe he's on vacation. Or maybe he's on a hunting trip. He might be away. Or maybe he's just old and hard of hearing. You better talk louder. And so they're screaming and yelling for their God to send fire from heaven. And then they even start cutting themselves with knives, hoping that the sight of blood may influence these pagan gods they worship. And hours of this go on. And finally, Finally, they are exhausted, and nothing has happened. And I picture Elijah sitting under an umbrella somewhere eating a sandwich. And then he puts the sandwich down and stands up and says, "My turn?" All right. And he walks over where this sacrifice is laid out, this huge bull. And he says, "Let's dig a trench around this thing." Okay. So they dig basically a moat around the sacrifice, several feet deep, a trench all the way around it. And he says, "Now go fill up 4 barrels of water." They do it. He says, "Dump that water over the top of the sacrifice." They do it. He says, "Do it again. 4 more barrels of water." They go back and fill up the barrels again, drench the sacrifice. He says, "Do it again." And by now, when they pour the barrels of water over the sacrifice, it's not only soaked everything on the altar, it has filled up the trench they have dug around the altar. Talk about giving yourself a handicap, doing everything you can to say that I'm not cheating here. And so once this thing is completely soaked, Elijah stands up and says, "God, show these people who's God and give them one more chance to repent." And boom, fire falls from heaven. Boom. And it not only burns up the sacrifice, it says it burns up the very stones of the altar and just totally evaporates the several feet of water in that trench around it. In just a moment, it is gone. And these hundreds or thousands of people who have been watching all day look at each other and go, "Ooh." And then they go, And then they take out after the 850 false prophets and they slaughter them. When we were up on top of Mount Carmel, there's a statue of Elijah up there, the highest point, and he's holding a big knife in his hand like this, and you think, "Oh, that's interesting." And then you look down at his foot. He's got his foot on the head of one of these fake prophets. It's a pretty impressive statue. What a victory for the true God. What a victory for God's prophet, Elijah. Elijah said, "You want power? You want something real? You want to worship the true God? This is it." And boom, it happens just like that. In the twinkling of an eye. You'd think Elijah would be set for life. Because that's a pretty good resume opener right there. Defeated 850 false prophets on top of Mount Carmel. That's your headline right there. Instead, when word gets back to Jezebel, she says, "By the time 24 hours have passed, Elijah, same thing is going to happen to you." And so, moments after his greatest triumph, this incredible show of God's power, Elijah tucks his tail and runs away to a distant land. And he finds a place to sit under a tree, and he falls down and he says, "Just kill me. God, just kill me. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I'm the only one left. I'm pitiful. Please just take my life." Bookmark. I want to tell you this morning about something I rarely talk about. My sports career. Now, some of you don't know me well enough to laugh like that. Some of you could look at me and say, "I can see him on the line of a football team somewhere. He's a big guy. I can see that." I have a brother that's 4 years older than me. My brother was a star athlete. He played golf. He played basketball. He ran track. He not only played football, he was the quarterback of a very, very good football team, a powerhouse in South Texas football. I looked at my brother 4 years ahead of me, and I thought, I want to be like that. I want to be like my brother. And so my first opportunity came in 7th grade, junior high school. And I can back up what I say because I had one of those mothers who keeps everything. Every clipping, every program, every report card. She kept everything in 2 scrapbooks that she made me. And this one is about my junior high years. And on the first page here, yeah, I was number 56. Now, our high school team was the Longhorns. Our junior high team was the Shorthorns. Yeah. And so I thought, I'm going to go out for football in 7th grade. I'm going to be just like my brother. There were just a couple of problems. Let me read to you from the official purple mimeographed program here. It doesn't smell good anymore, but number 56, Mike Robertson, 5'3", 135 pounds, center. 135 pounds, 5'3", center. That does not go together. That's an oxymoron. I went out for football my 7th grade year, and they gave us 2 uniforms, one for games, one for practice. And the pants that they gave me for practice had something wrong with the buckle. Consequently, my pants would not stay up. Now, this is a problem. When you have to block, when you have to run, when you have to crouch down and hike the ball, you know, I'd be running down, doing blocking practice, holding my pants with one hand, blocking with the other hand. And then when I had to get down, I had to hike the ball, stand up, pull my pants up, and then try to hit somebody. Well, of course, I caught the coach's eye right away. We got something really special here. And so they worked with me. I had this great desire. I wanted to succeed at this so badly. And so by the time we practiced for a few weeks, by the time our first game came around, I had found my place on the team. It was right here. This is where I spent football season. I learned to know it very well. Oh, I was totally engaged. I kept my helmet on every second of the game, just waiting for the call. I followed everything that happened on the field. I was alert. It was a problem of desirability. I had the desire, but no ability. I got in one game, the last game of the season, the last 33 seconds of the last game of the season. At that point, our team was so far behind that the coach figured even Mike Robertson cannot hurt us at this point. So he called my name. I was out there. We even had the ball. And so they called the play. I got down in my crouch. I had my game pants on. They stayed up. So that was much better. I hiked the ball. Something happened behind me. I don't know what. People were jumping on me. The clock ran out. I had one play, and that was it. That was the end of my football career. But you know, after football comes basketball season. And I thought, maybe that's my niche right there, basketball. Okay, I'm going to play basketball. So I went out for basketball. And again, the coaches recognized something really special in me because at basketball, I was a triple threat. I was slow, I was clumsy, and I couldn't make a shot. Other than that, I was good. And so once again, I spent basketball season right here. Went to every game, sat right here. And once again, the last game of the season, 13 seconds left in the game. The coach, out of the kindness of his heart, said, okay, Mike, get in there. 13 seconds. I got in there. Somebody actually passed me the ball. I immediately passed it to somebody else. I didn't even dribble. Well, when the coach called on me, I dribbled a little bit, but just because I was excited. That's my total sports career right there. 2 sports, a total of 46 seconds played, many, many hours spent practicing for nothing. Now, see, when I first started working on the sermon, I thought, what I'm going to talk about is how you got to get off of the bench and get into the game. But then I thought about it, and I thought, that's not what my story says at all. And I realized I only had a half a message. I had a story, but I didn't have a good point. I didn't have a conclusion. And I thought, God, why would you plant this seed in my mind? Why would you say, this is how you want to start? You want to make this about sitting on that bench and how you hardly ever got to do anything. And then after a few days of thinking about it, I got the answer. Because see, in 7th grade, I sat on the bench for football. I sat on the bench for basketball, and nothing ever happened. But just a year or two after that, I found a different bench to sit on. And this time, I got to play. And you know what? That has made all the difference in my life. Because that made me want to sing. That made me become a music major at Baylor. That made me work at a series of churches starting when I was 13 years old. That led to me meeting the woman I would marry. In fact, that little snippet I just played is from the first song I ever wrote for her. The second song I wrote for her was asking her to marry me. And it got played on a radio station here while we were sitting in Zilker Park. And she said yes. And the third song I wrote for her was when we stood up on a stage like this, holding hands, and I sang it to her, and she was wearing a pretty white dress, and I was in a tuxedo. Because sitting on that bench led me to church after church, to job after job, to place after place where I could use that, where I could play, and not just sit on the bench feeling useless. And it ultimately has led me to be where I am today because of that experience. And so the lesson God planted in my brain was, you know what? There's nothing wrong with sitting on a bench when you find the right bench to sit on. Folks, that's a tweetable moment there. That's a lesson that I could not have thought of on my own. Sitting on the bench is not bad if you're sitting on the right bench. So I don't know what your bench is today. Maybe it's a little tiny short bench where you sit and you tell Bible stories to children, like at our preschool. Or maybe it's a bench where you work on things, you put together things, or a workbench where you are involved with Habitat for Humanity or helping someone create a new life for themselves. Maybe it's a judge's bench where you stand and you advocate for a child who needs someone on their side. Maybe it's a weight bench where you get yourself into better condition so you'll be better able to serve, better able to work in the kingdom of God. I don't know what your bench is. I know that mine is not beside a football field or basketball court. And I know that my life went into overdrive when I finally found what my bench actually was. So I don't know where your bench is, but one thing I do know is that it's not just the bench you're sitting on right now. That God has bigger plans for you than the bench you're sitting there just listening to me. God says, I have something special for you. What happened to Elijah? He continued running away, and eventually he found a cave. And he lived in this cave and felt sorry for himself. We saw that cave too, didn't we, Chloe? There's a church built over it now. And it's quite a contrast from the top of Mount Carmel into that dark, black cave. And God came calling on Elijah in that cave. God has an amazing calling card. He announced himself in an incredible way. It says, first there was a hurricane, and there were winds that were so severe it split the rocks on the mountaintop. But it says God was not in the hurricane. Then it says there was an earthquake that shook everything, but it says God was not in the earthquake. Then it says there was a raging fire that destroyed everything in its path, but it says God was not in the fire. And as I was getting ready for this morning, I thought, it's really interesting that in the last 2 weeks, all we've heard about is hurricanes and earthquakes and fires. Wow. It says God was not in those things, but then Elijah heard a still small voice. And God said, Elijah, why are you here? And Elijah gave his sad song, nobody likes me. Everybody's against me. I'm the only one there. And God said, get up. You have more to do. You think nobody appreciates you anymore? God said, I still have 7,000 people in the city where you fled from that are believers. 7,000 people. You're not alone. You have work to do. He said, you, Elijah, are going to pick the next king of Israel. You, Mr. Whiny. And he says, you're also going to choose the next prophet, the one who is going to succeed you. Get up, stop feeling sorry for yourself, and come do the things I have prepared you to do. I think God comes and knocks on every one of our doors at some point and says, why are you here? Why are you just sitting there? I have more for you to do. Elijah went back and did exactly what God asked of him. And he did such a good job of it, Elijah got an incredible perk. He didn't die. What? No, Elijah did not die. God sent a limo for him. The Bible says God sent a flaming chariot and Elijah jumped on it and it took him right to heaven. Do not pass go. He ascended directly into heaven. Clearly, God was pleased with him once he got up off of that bench. And so I wonder, Sunday after Sunday, when we come together and we sit here and it may be that we feel like, okay, I've fulfilled my duty. But see, God's plan for you is not coming to church every Sunday. That's the start of the plan. That's the place where you may first realize the plan or get an inkling of the plan that God has from you. But this is just the starting place. This is the place we come to realize those plans, to share those plans, to say, now I know where my bench is. And then we leave this place and we go there and we do something incredible through God's help. What's your bench? Where is your bench? If you haven't ever found it, it's totally possible to go through your whole life and never find your bench. But most of us don't ever look for it. Where is your bench? What can you do for the kingdom of God to help people to make this world a better place and for you to draw closer to your Creator?